What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. It's time for another episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit. Today, War 10 CK70 requests we build a Cryomancer, bonus points if we use the Eldritch Scion Magus. Now, I've built a few of those in my career, a few of the Gishy boys, if you will. I didn't want to make the same one that I had time and time again, so we challenged ourselves to do something a little different, and like I find myself saying this every week. Every week I spit out something that I'm just like, yeah, I want to play that. That would be fun. But if you're liking what you're seeing, remember to like, subscribe, and ding the bell. Patronage at any tier gets you a Google sheet that this build is built upon and helps me have more time to Google very niche corner builds like this. I appreciate y'all. Anyway, this week's episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit was brought to you in part by The Real Slim Cakey. Yeah, can't even make that name up. I thank you for your support, friend. Now, here we go. Alrighty. So this week's build took me quite a bit of time, like I said, to sit down and brew just to make this weird thing work. Because when I hear Cryomancy, other than like the Winter Witch, both archetype and prestige class, because someone thought that through, what I usually think of is debuffing. Basically, every class in this game that can do something with the powers of ice can use those powers to slow down the bad guys, which makes sense. I live in a place where it gets pretty cold. I don't really want to do anything when I'm pretty cold. So basically, today's build is all about stacking on painful debuffs. You won't do as much damage as the Shocking Grasp guy with the Draconic Bloodline and Intensify spell, but you will prevent the bad guys from doing anything other than like a move action to stand up at best, usually. It's real cool. Now, I guess I ought to address the frozen mastodon in the room. Yes, I called this video the Gishtic Theurge, and yes, that means we will be going into the Mystic Theurge Prestige class. Today specifically, we're looking at 6 levels of Eldritch Scion Magus, 4 levels of Nature Priest Druid, and 10 levels of Mystic Theurge. We are an Eldritch Scion because it was requested we build around the Eldritch Scion, but I really wanted to play with some Druid stuff, so this seemed like a great way to have my potion of Cure Light Wounds and drink it too, you know what I mean? The Eldritch Scion is a Magus archetype that replaces Spell Recall, alters spell combat, gets some stuff a little later in return. Not only is this particular Magus archetype charisma based, it also gets a bloodline as though it were a Blood Rager. The drawback here is it can only access stuff from the Blood Rager bloodline by entering a state of mystical focus as a swift action by burning a point from their Eldritch pool, eventually getting the bonus spells and stuff, but we're not going to be here that long. Combining this with the Druid, on the other side, we will be playing the Nature Priest. Now, unfortunately, I really wanted to play the Face Speaker because, of course, being monostat to charisma would make our casting stuff a little bit better. But there's a really cool feat that druids can get for this build that is locked into wisdom, and so too shall we be. The Nature Priest functions basically the same as your regular druid, except they worship a deity and receive spells, and their alignment must be locked within one step of that deity. They get knowledge religion instead of geography, proficiency with the deity's favored weapon, access to different domains, some other stuff as well, but we're not as worried about it today. Essentially, this is just a cleric with a different spell list, which again is important for some of the feats we'll be taking down the line. Mystic Theurge, of course, allows us to combine 2 casting classes together, letting us cast spells from one side of our spell list, from the other side of the spell list, and then eventually casting 2 spells for the price of 1 in terms of action economy. It also ups our caster levels up on both sides before we prestiged in, which is kind of where the hidden strength of this build and the prestige class comes from. We end up, trait shenanigans aside, a 16th level Magus, 14th level Druid, with access to up to 7th level Druid spells and 6th level Magus spells, which helps us remain threatening, despite the fact that, well, we're not exactly tier 1 on this one. But what we are, indeed, is very multiple ability dependent, so today for our race we will be selecting the Aasimar, the vanilla one no less. Get a little wisdom, get a little charisma, don't take a debuff. Since those are our 2 most important stats, it seems real good to me to have those good from jump. Unfortunately, there's no sweet favored class bonuses shenanigans today. Can't be helped, I suppose. In any case, our choice of deity is a real weird one today, not someone I ever thought I would seek out. And once I get my editor squared away, we'll probably make a video about this. Actually, we'll definitely make a video about this. because it was requested, but today's deity gives us that sweet icy goodness and also a pretty darn good weapon to throw at people. Of all the things in the world for us to worship, it will be the Oni Daimyo Uzume. And Oni Daimyo might be a weird choice for a druid, but I mean areas of concern here are blizzards, frozen ghosts, and starvation. Focus in real hard on the blizzards bit, and we can go full Donner Party druid, which I think is super flavorful. Tastes like people. Also, Uzume gives us access to the Irumi as our favorite weapon. Before the errata of this thing, the Irumi had reach. As it stands now, it's a 1d8 18 to 20 times 2 slashing monk weapon, which is important for us later, but mostly we're just here to make sure we can get that sweet 15 to 20 thing, which also has a pretty sizable damage die given its threat range. Bonus points if your GM will let you take the one that had reach before the errata. Why do we want that 15 to 20 threat range, you might ask? Well, for a lot of reasons, mostly doing a lot of damage, but our bloodline today, since unfortunately I could not squeeze Orc Draconic on here like you always do, will be the Fey bloodline. We'll get the ability to charge through difficult terrain, and if we move at least 10 feet we get blur for a round. But we're mostly here for confusing critical. Each time you confirm a critical hit, the target must succeed at a will save or be confused for a round. The DC for the save is equal to 10 plus half your Blood Rager or Magus level plus your Con mod. This is a mind-affecting compulsion effect. Now, of all the DCs we'll be throwing at people today, this is probably the lowest of them. Nevertheless, I think you'd be surprised how many things will fail this, especially at lower level play, though technically we won't have this until 4th, or how many things are going to roll and fail once, your witch friend has them disadvantaged and misfortuned. Man, I wish Eldritch Scion stacked with Hexcrafter, then we'd be able to do it all in-house. Oh well. The spell of choice today is Frigid Touch once again. That 4d6 and staggering folks looks real good. God, if you crit with this, they're just out for the combat. And we'll be taking Wayang Spell Hunter, so when we meta magic it, we will reduce the total level adjustment by 1. On top of that, Magical Knack, choosing Druid means we can treat our caster level as 2 higher for the lower of our 2 casting classes. For our stat priority, Wisdom first and foremost. Wisdom will dictate basically all the things we will be doing. Honestly, our Magus spells are probably mostly just to keep ourselves buffed and things, because we're trying to build a frontline character who's got 10d6 hit dice. That's terrifying, but also if you're like mirror imaged and displaced and things like that, I think you'll come out just fine. Charisma right behind it for our Magus stuff, then Constitution for our Blood Rager stuff, and also so you don't die horribly. Dexterity is the 4th most important stat today. Weird. Who am I and what have I done with me? Really, since we're so mad, we need to focus more things on Wisdom than Dexterity. We'll talk about how we'll do that a little later in the video. Intelligence next, because you probably want an extra skill rank more than you want Strength, which again, to the floor. Now for our feats. Weapon focus Irumi out the gate. Honestly, the +1 to hit looks pretty good on us because our BAB will never get super high up there. Honestly, a lot of our feats today are just shoring up the weaknesses of the left side of our Google sheet. Our BAB only ever gets to 10. We're only ever making 1 attack. Rather than using feats for crazy value, we just gotta use them for balance. We're also taking weapon focus as it is a prerequisite for Weapon of the Chosen, which will be our next feat. And the only real rules anything I wanted to debate on this video. The prerequisite for Weapon of the Chosen is weapon focus with your deity's favorite weapon. We got it. You must also worship and receive spells from a deity. This feat was very clearly made just for like war priests and battle clerics and things like that. I think it's more than reasonable to think that the nature priest, being bound to all of the cleric stuff, can't be more than 1 step away from lawful evil on this one. And the flavor text in the role section of the Druid. Druids worship personifications of elemental forces, natural powers, or nature itself. Typically, this means devotion to a nature deity. I think it's more than reasonable to assume that we are receiving spells from a deity. Certainly, it's not hard for a Druid to fall from grace. I digress. Weapon of the Chosen says, as a swift action, you can call upon your deity to guide an attack you make with, in our case, an Irumi. On your next attack in that round, the weapon counts as magic for breaking DR or striking a ghost. If you miss because of concealment, you can re-roll it 1 time to see whether you actually hit. This is mostly attacks, but honestly, now that I've played some more of the Pathfinder APs, since that very, very ancient War Priest video we did, God Pray for Rain, follow this card. I'm beginning to realize how much better that actually is, even if it's just breaking something's DR5 magic. If you're level 3 and fighting too many ghosts, you're either in Carrion Crown or maybe talk to your GM about how mean he's being. Improved Weapon of the Chosen does the same thing, except you gain the benefits on all attacks till the start of your next turn, and your attacks gain a single alignment component of your deity. Since our deity is lawful evil, we can't have that cold iron silver thing, but we could get a free axiomatic or unholy weapon, which again, I think you get a lot more mileage out of than you think you would, especially in low level play. We're mostly just here though for greater weapon of the chosen. Whenever you use your deity's favored weapon to attempt a single attack with the attack action, you roll 2 dice and take the highest. You don't need to use weapon of the chosen to get this full benefit. As usual, the reroll doesn't apply to confirmation rolls. And remember, using Vital Strike is using a single attack with the attack action. Charge is its own separate thing. Parrying like a swashbuckler is its own separate thing. Vital Strike does in fact use that attack action. And since Vital Strike is our very next feat, that shores up, again, that really poor base attack bonus of this character. If you're rolling with advantage, statistically speaking, you're rolling 15 or more 51% of the time. This is definitely a build that wants to have just one really good attack in a round as opposed to just flailing and being sad. Rather, we'd like to make our enemies flail and be sad, and the reason basically entirely that I wanted to build a druid today was I heard cryomancy and I heard gish, and I was hearkened to one of my favorite feats in this game that I've never got to build around, Winter's Strike. It requires either nature magic, a bad feat tax, or the ability to cast druid or ranger spells. Aha, we did it. Vital Strike and 5 ranks Knowledge Nature, a number of times per day equal to your Wisdom mod. When you use Vital Strike or Improved or Greater, your strike saps the strength of your opponent. The creature hit must succeed at a fort DC 10 plus half character level plus Wisdom, or become fatigued for a number of rounds equal to your Wisdom mod minimum 1. You can choose to use this ability as a free action after you hit. It's supernatural. Basically, this just prevents us from burning low-level spell slots on Frostbite. And we get to do it a little more. Basically, every time you hit with a Vital Strike, they save or the bad guy cannot run or charge, takes a -2 to strength and dex. If you happen to do it again next round, you make them exhausted, which takes that -2 and kicks it to a -6. This happens over the course of 2 turns, yes, but I'm willing to bet whatever you're fighting will last longer than 2 Vital Strikes from you. Anyway, moving forward, Aesthetic Style, Aesthetic Form, Aesthetic Strike will be our next 3 feats. Having a monk weapon means we don't have to finagle weird ways for value on this one this time. Aesthetic Strike doesn't look nearly as good on an Arumi as it does like a deck of playing cards or wave blades. But consider when Vital Striking how 2d8 would become 4d6. Then extra spell synthesis, one of the clutch feats released in Chronicle of Legends, gives us an extra use of that sweet Mystic Theurge capstone. Literally, I tried to set this build up in such a way that the 10th level of Mystic Theurge would not happen at 20, it would happen instead at 19th, just so we could make sure this goes off. Now, we do get just a little bit of Magus Arcana. Flamboyant Arcana will not be our bread and butter necessarily, because our Eldritch pool will be smaller than a lot of Magi, but that doesn't mean it's still not a pretty sweet thing to have in your back pocket should things see through your displacement, your mirror images, or you just run out of spell slots. Getting to Opportune Parry and Riposte like a swashbuckler is value. We ran Eldritch Scion out to level 6 so we could grab Broad Study. Critical tech for this build, Broad Study will allow us to use Druid spells on the end of Spell Strike. We'll also grab from that one bonus feat Rhyme spell, which causes creatures that take cold damage from the spell you meta-magic with it to become entangled for a number of rounds equal to the original level of that spell, which imposes a -2 on attack rolls and a -4 on dex. We've now hit their dexterity for 10 points after exhausting and entangling them. There are some monsters in this game that will just be completely unable to move at this point. Spaghetti Boys have lost almost all of their value, everyone else has watched their armor class drop by 5, and you can't run or charge. And when our sweet spell we're rhyming most of the time, Frigid Touch, staggers them, they only get a single move action or standard action, but not both. makes for a pretty solid lock. For extra fun times, since our charisma is super good and we've got 3 feats we could jam on the training enchantment today, Dazzling Display. If you end up having the extra action economy over the course of a longer combat, you could make an Intimidate check to demoralize folks, throwing a -2 down on attack rolls, saving throws, skill checks, and ability checks further stacks up the pain. It's real nice. For the other 2 training enchants, just probably grab extra Arcane pool if you can. We'll need the extra points in the pool for value. Unlike all of the non-sorcerer, non-blood rager things that exist out there that get bloodlines, the Eldritch Scion only has the bloodline sometimes and has to burn from a resource pool to grab the thing. Anywho, not a lot of sweet damage math today this time. Honestly, because we have a little more spell synthesis stuff to talk about. First and foremost, the most important enchantment on this build, by far, the Guided Enchantment coming at us all the way from A History of Ashes will allow us to use our Wisdom for attack and damage with our Irumi. This, among other reasons, is why our Wisdom is so darn important to us. And yes, I know I've GM'd for a couple of druids who I did not allow to take this because I saw that big scary 3.5 sticker and thought, oh, this is too good, can't have it. I apologize, Francis Root. Not only does this help a character who otherwise would be so mad that you'd be flailing your Irumi around for like a D8 -2, actually do what they want to do, it's not even really that broken. Again, our base attack only ever ends up at 10. Sometimes a little higher if we want to cast a quickened true strike before our attack, but there are folks who are just going to outswing us. There are also folks who are just gonna be better on the battlefield than we are. Yeah, we're a weird pseudo fullcaster thing, but we're not Druid 20 or Cleric 20 or Wizard 20. There are lots of folks who will outperform us. Like a lot of folks, again, I probably just saw that 3.5 sticker and got super spooked about it. I think this is totally fine. The Keen and spell storing enchants are super clutch for all magi everywhere. Remember that your spells use a weapon's threat range, but only crit ×2. And putting an extra spell inside your weapon means you can have 2 spells go off at once, or in the case of a Mystic Theurge, 3. Again, not anywhere near as explosive as some of the other magi I've built, but that doesn't mean it won't super hurt. The Cruel enchantment can also be quite a fun one. Stack the Sickened condition on top of everything, and we get a lot of fun, different ways to slap stackable -2s on things. Sickened being a -2 on attack, damage, saving throws, skill checks, and ability checks as you get boo-boo tummy. So in total, after entangling, exhausting, shaking, sickening, you're looking at a -6 on attack, a -2 on damage, a -4 on saves and abilities and skills, a -6 to strength, and a -10 to dexterity. We can also confuse folks, we can also stagger folks. Debuff City, basically. And that's not even getting into the spells we can cast to make this go even farther. Those numbers seem really scary to me, and can be an amazing 1-2 punch if somebody's ready to do dexterity damage, or take your shaken and move it to frightened, or even just make life a little easier on the swashbuckler who's parrying, or also the you who's parrying with flamboyant Arcana. Really offsets the fact that your Bab is just not as good as theirs is. Meta magic rods are our friends, and we're using a weapon one-handed this time, so we don't gotta worry about any weird prehensile tail shenanigans. Pearls and Runestones of Power will also be super great for us to get extra spell slots. The more the merrier. 3 more. Man, this one's actually pretty magic item intensive, and we're not even talking about the big 6. Oh yeah, follow this card right here. Big 6. Get learnt. The Robe of Arcane Heritage will allow us to treat our sorcerer level as 4 higher than normal for the purpose of determining bloodline powers. There's enough FAQs out there that says this should also work for a Blood Rager. Since this was printed before the Blood Rager existed and says bloodline powers, it probably should be fine. Seriously. If your GM wants to push back on any of this, just show up with a control wizard. Hurt him real good. The Ring of Spell Storing is next. It contains up to 5 levels of spells that the wearer can cast. Each spell has a caster level equal to the minimum level needed to cast that spell. We don't need material or foci to cast them. A spellcaster can cast spells into that ring so long as the total spell level do not add up to more than 5. Meta magic takes up equal to modified. Again, just more spell slots, basically. Doubly useful for our druid who can just jam. 4 or 5 tech spells in there, or even just a couple of cure mods in case of a very rainy day. Lastly, the Ring of Arcane Mastery allows a wearer with an arcane pool to store 4 points in the ring as a swift action. They remain in the ring until used. We can expend the points to do Magus stuff. Mostly we're just trying to get 4 extra points to make sure we don't Nova out. Alrighty, before we talk about spells and all the weird wombo combo value we can get out of Mystic Theurge shenanigans, we should probably discuss before people start yelling at me in the comments that I'm cheating how exactly it is we're going to be vital striking and delivering a spell at the same time. Of course, the Magus with Spell Strike can deliver any touch spell from the pointy end of a sword. We will be abusing the ability to hold the charge. Of course, if you don't discharge the spell in the round in which you cast it, you can hold a spell you cast indefinitely. Think the Elder Scrolls, think sword in one hand, fireball in the other. Or in this case, it's like produce flame, whatever. You can continue to make touch attacks round after round. If you touch anything or anyone while holding a charge, even unintentionally, the spell discharges. So like, don't open the door. If you cast another spell, the touch spell dissipates. You can touch 1 friend as a standard action or up to 6 friends as a full round action, 1 second per friend as it were. Alternatively, you may make a normal unarmed attack or an attack with a natural weapon, or for us, an attack with a weird whip sword apparatus whilst holding a charge. If your unarmed attack or natural attack normally doesn't provoke, neither does this. If the attack hits, you deal normal damage for your unarmed attack or natural weapon and the spell discharges. If the attack misses, you still have a bunch of like cold coming off you, I guess. And yeah, that's our shtick. I suppose if you want to read very strictly to the letter of how this reads, if you don't discharge the spell in the round which you cast it, you couldn't do what we're trying to do. But this came from the core rulebook, and they weren't the best at covering all of their bases in terms of rules, which is weird because Quicken Spell was definitely a feat. Our plan is spend a swift action, use our quickened metamagic rod, cast a quickened rhymed frigid touch, hold the charge. As a standard action, use the attack action and vital strike. If the attack hits, you deal normal damage, or further in our case, a vital strike, and then frigid touches on top of it. The more you know, kids. Like we did before with our old Mystic Theurge video. Did you miss that one? Also, follow this card. That one was fun. I would be remiss if we didn't talk about some sweet spell combos that we can cast between the Magus and the Druid when we're spell synthesizing. Although, God, I really wish you could get more than 2 on this. First and foremost, it's Frigid Touch, as this appears both on the Magus and Druid spell list. Melee touch attack that does 4d6 points of cold damage and causes the target to be staggered for a round. If you crit, they're staggered for a minute. Or if you spell synthesize this and have one in the spell storing, you casually throw 12d6 of cold damage at people. Plus 3 rhyme spell saves, plus that DC has gone up because we've spell synthesized it. It's super good. Ice Storm also appears both on the Druid and Magus list as a 4th level spell. It's a 20-foot radius, 40-foot high cylinder of no save, 2d6 cold, 3d6 bludgeoning, difficult terrain for rounds per level. Casting this twice means you can affect a wider area. It took me all the way up until Iron Fang Invasion and a Stone Oracle to realize exactly how good spells like this are. Chip damage with no save will add up over time. Next, Ice Slick on either side. It's like Grease, except you take 1d6 plus 1 per caster level, max 10, save for half, and to not fall prone. It makes difficult terrain, which you can walk through at half normal speed with a DC 10 acrobatics check. Failure by 4 or less, you're just slip sliding around. Failure by 5 or more, you fall prone. Creatures that don't move don't have to make the check. A 5-foot square of ice has hardness 0 and 3 HP. It's instantaneous but persists as non-magical ice. Under temperate conditions, the ice lasts 1 minute per level. In the tropics, it might only last half as long. In cold environments, it could last indefinitely. Super fun to sub-zero this at somebody's feet, then cast Frigid Touch at them at the same time to trip them and stagger them, guaranteeing all they do in that turn is use a move action to stand up and provoke from you. It's kind of rude, but I'll take it. Next, on the Druid side, Winter Grasp. Ice encrusts the ground, radiating supernatural cold and making it hard for folks to maintain their balance. The icy ground is treated as normal ice, forcing creatures to spend 2 squares of movement to enter an icy square, and increasing the DC of acrobatics checks in the area by 5. A creature that begins its turn in affected areas takes 1d6 points of cold damage and a -2 penalty on saving throws against our spells for a round. Since that ups the DC of acrobatics checks by 5, coupling Winter Grasp with, say, Grease or Greater Grease on the Magus side, or Ice Slick again, just makes it a little more likely that folks are going to fall and eat it. Or, since that spell lasts rounds per level, during the next round you cast something like Ice Spears at them. One or more giant spears of ice lance up out of the ground, each stalagmite-like icicle affects a 5-foot square and tapers to a height of 10 feet. You may cause a number of ice spears equal to 1 spear for every 4 caster levels you possess to burst from the ground. A creature that occupies a square from which a spear extends or that's within 10 feet of the ground below takes 2d6 points of piercing and 2d6 points of cold damage per square. And creatures that take up more than 1 square can be hit by multiple spears if your caster level is so high that you'd like to just impale people. The explosive growth can also trip foes. When the spears erupt from the ground, they attempt a combat maneuver check to trip any target that takes damage from the spears, with a total bonus equal to, in our case, our caster level plus wisdom. Each additional ice spear beyond the first that strikes a single foe grants a +10 on this combat maneuver check. If the check is successful, God, and if you hit them with enough spears, it better be, because you're adding +20, 30, the ice spears knock the foe prone, adding tripped and all the debuffs from tripped to the big line of conditions we can regularly put on things. If you cast the spell upon an area covered with ice or snow, like if you Winter Grasp before, saves against the effect take -2 and the spell effect gets a +4 on its CMB. The ice spears also remain. They melt as normal and provide cover with 5 hardness and 30 hit points. Also, just casting this at the same time as a Grease after putting Winter Grasp down probably ends the combat in the same way Black Tentacles does, except, well, ice flavored, basically. Now, if you really want to cause those strange rules as intended versus magic headaches, Freezing Sphere on the Magus side, basically a giant ice fireball that explodes in a 40-foot radius burst, dealing 1d6 points of cold damage per caster level, maximum 15d6 to each creature in the area. Creatures of the water subtype take 1d8 per caster level and they're staggered. If the freezing sphere strikes a body of water or liquid that is principally water, it freezes the liquid to a depth of 6 inches in a 40-foot radius. The ice lasts for 1 round per caster level. Creatures that were swimming on the surface of a targeted body of water become trapped in the ice. Oops. Attempting to break free is a full round action. It's a DC 25 strength or escape artist check to do so. You can also hold the charge on this if you really want to. From the druid side of your spell list, cast Control Water. Folks are standing by the edge of the water. You need a wave to come up over the ship and then freeze and trap people as the water hits those squares. Yeah, fun times. Anyway, one final one, and then we're gonna call it for today. From the druid side, Wall of Thorns makes 1 10-foot cube per level, a very tough, pliable, tangled brush bearing needle-sharp thorns as long as a human's finger. Those are enormous also. Stop real quick, look at your fingers. Imagine if those were sharp pointies. It's terrifying. Any creature forced into or attempting to move through a wall of thorns takes piercing damage per round of movement equal to 25 minus the creature's AC. Dex and dodge don't count for this, so essentially you're taking damage equal to 25 minus your flat-footed armor class. Creatures can force their way slowly through the wall by making a strength check as a full round action. For every 5 points by which the check exceeds 20, a creature can move up to 5 feet, which then hurts you for every 5 feet through. You can hack through it, you can get stuck in it. Mostly it just does a lot of damage, and I don't think anything in this world is better than a wall spell other than a second wall spell tacked on to make the wall even longer, higher, or otherwise painful. Wall of Ice makes a 1 inch thick per caster level, covering up to 10-foot square area per caster level. And if they'd rather break through the ice than go through the thorns, they'll take 1d6 plus 1 point of cold damage. This is after spending rounds to hack the wall apart. Also, there's no save on it. More importantly, you're doing, again, that sweet chip damage as you continue to set up, debuff. Really do whatever you need to do. This one's switch hitter with a capital switch hitter, and that is all the time I have for today. What do y'all think? Is the Gishtik Theurge playable? Would you play it? How's Cryomancy gone in your games? How many red dragons can we wreck with this? Let me know down in the comments. Next week, well, it's a pretty simple patron request, a dexterity-based Inquisitor. Actually have one of those in my back pocket for a campaign. Suppose we can talk about one of my personal builds next week? Yeah, sure, why not? Anyway, again, thank you all so much for your support and watching. I'll see you next week.